The woman didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't even move. And somehow, that made everyone around her more uncomfortable than if she had caused a scene. Because the truth was, she didn't look like someone who would lose. The airport gate buzzed with movement, but right at the entrance to the priority boarding lane, everything had slowed to a strange, tense stillness. A young agent stood with her hand raised, blocking the path like a wall. "Priority boarding isn't for you," she said, her tone tight but loud enough to be heard. "Please step aside." The woman in front of her, tall, composed, dressed in a simple but elegant navy suit, looked down briefly at the boarding pass in her hand, then back up again. Her eyes were calm, too calm. "I believe there's been a mistake," she replied quietly. A few passengers nearby leaned in. Phones started to rise. It wasn't dramatic yet, but it was about to be. The agent's lips curled into something that looked like a smile but wasn't. "There's no mistake. You're in the wrong line." Behind the woman, a man in a polo shirt stepped forward. Without even glancing at his ticket, the agent waved him through. "Go ahead, sir." The contrast was immediate and obvious. The woman noticed it, everyone did. But she didn't react, not outwardly. Instead, she glanced up at the large digital clock above the gate. 8 minutes. That was all it would take. Her name was Clara Whitmore, ***. At 63, she had learned something most people never fully understood. Power didn't always need to shout. Sometimes, it only needed to wait. She had deliberately chosen to travel alone that morning. No assistant, no executive escort, no VIP treatment. For the first time in years, she wanted to see her company the way ordinary passengers did. Because Clara Whitmore wasn't just another traveler. She was the founder and CEO of one of the largest airline groups in North America. And what she was seeing right now wasn't good. "Ma'am, you're holding up the line." A man's voice cut in, firm, slightly irritated. Clara turned her head slowly. A supervisor mid-40s, crisp uniform, badge reading Ethan Cole ***, had stepped forward. "There's no need to make this complicated," he continued. "Our staff has already explained the situation." Clara held out her boarding pass again. "Then perhaps you could explain it properly." He didn't take it immediately. When he finally did, he barely glanced at it before handing it back. "Sometimes people misunderstand boarding zones." "I'm not misunderstanding anything," Clara said, still calm. "Seat 1A first class." There was a pause. A brief flicker in his expression. Then it hardened. "Or perhaps," he said slowly, "this ticket doesn't belong to you." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted higher now. Clara felt the weight of the moment, but she didn't let it touch her posture. "I can verify my identity," she said, "but I'd prefer you verify the ticket first." Ethan didn't move toward the scanner. Didn't look again. Didn't even pretend to check. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it sound like a warning. "You can step aside," he said, "or we can involve security." There it was. The escalation. The assumption. The quiet threat. Clara inhaled slowly. This wasn't confusion. This was something else. And she needed to understand how deep it went. She stayed exactly where she was. "I'd like to speak with someone above you," she said. "I am the supervisor." "Then I'd like to speak to whoever supervises you." "That's not happening." Another pause. Another shift in the air. The tension was no longer subtle. It was thick, visible, almost physical. A security officer had already begun walking toward them. Clara noticed everything. The way Ethan positioned himself between her and the gate. The way the agent behind the desk crossed her arms. The way some passengers avoided eye contact, while others watched with quiet curiosity. And then something else. A flight attendant standing near the jet bridge. Older, observant, concerned. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Clara knew someone here understood this wasn't right. She reached into her bag. Slowly, carefully, no sudden movements, and pulled out a sleek black card. She placed it gently on the counter. "Call corporate operations," she said, "now." The agent scoffed. "Everyone has fancy cards, ma'am." Ethan didn't even look at it. "We're not calling anyone," he said. Clara nodded once, then stepped aside, not in defeat but in precision. She took out her phone, dialed one number, and waited. When the call connected, her voice didn't rise. "This is Whitmore," she said. "Gate C-17, I need protocol activated." A pause. Then she ended the call. She looked up at the clock again. 6 minutes. At first, nothing happened. Then everything did. The scanner beeped, then froze. The gate computer glitched. The boarding display flickered. "Please stand by." Ethan frowned, tapping keys. The agent tried logging in again. "System error," she muttered. The security officer stopped mid-step, touching his earpiece. Then stepped back. "New instructions," he said quietly. Ethan turned sharply. "What instructions?" The officer shook his head. "I'm not to intervene." Now the tension shifted. Not toward Clara, but away from her, and on to them. The crowd sensed it. People stopped pretending not to watch. Phones were no longer hidden. Whispers spread. "What's happening? Why did the system shut down? Who is she?" Clara stood still, unshaken, unbothered, waiting. Then came the sound. Sharp heels against polished floor. Fast, purposeful. A woman in a dark suit approached, flanked by airport operations staff. Her expression was tight with urgency. She didn't stop at the desk. Didn't look at Ethan. Didn't acknowledge the agent. She went straight to Clara. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, slightly breathless, "we apologize." The words landed like a shockwave. Ethan froze. The agent blinked. Passengers leaned forward. Phones tilted for a better angle. "Apologize for what?" Clara asked quietly. "For not being informed you were traveling today," the woman said. Silence. Then realization. Like a domino effect. "She's a... Wait. Is that..." Ethan's face drained of color. "Whitmore as in..." "Yes," the woman confirmed. "Our CEO." Everything changed. In an instant. The authority. The confidence. The narrative. It flipped. Completely. "What happened here?" the executive demanded. Clara handed over her boarding pass. "I attempted to board," she said simply. "I was denied, dismissed, and threatened with removal." The executive turned sharply. "This is first class. Why wasn't it scanned?" Ethan opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. There was confusion. "No," Clara interrupted. Her voice was still calm. But now it carried weight. There was assumption. She looked directly at him. "You had every opportunity to verify. You chose not to." No one spoke. No one moved. "You had 6 minutes," she continued. 6 minutes to treat one passenger with basic respect." A pause. Then, "You failed." The consequences were immediate. And public. Badges were removed. Access revoked. No shouting. No drama. Just quiet accountability. And somehow that made it heavier. But Clara didn't leave. She didn't board. She didn't walk away. Because something the flight attendant had said lingered in her mind. This isn't the first time. That sentence stayed with her. And it changed everything. Within an hour, she wasn't at the gate anymore. She was upstairs, in the operations office, reviewing records, reading complaints, dozens, then hundreds, patterns, clear, repeated, ignored. Passengers questioned, delayed, dismissed, all labeled the same way. Misunderstanding. Her hands tightened slightly on the pages. This wasn't a mistake. This was a system. By nightfall, she was no longer just investigating. She was uncovering something far bigger. Names appeared again and again. Approvals. Sign-offs. One name stood out. Senior leadership. Someone who had been quietly shaping how complaints were handled. Or buried. Then came the twist. The leak. A memo. With her name on it, claiming she had approved everything. Clara stared at the screen. "This isn't real," she said. But it looked real. Too real. Someone had planned this. The night turned into a race. Digital trails, authentication logs, metadata, and then finally the truth. The memo was forged, backdated, planted, and behind it, the same executive whose name kept appearing in the complaint records. By morning, Clara wasn't defending herself anymore. She was ready. At 11 a.m., she stood at the exact same gate, the same spot where she had been told she didn't belong. But this time, everyone was watching. Reporters, passengers, staff, and the man who thought he could hide the truth. She spoke clearly, calmly, without notes. "What happened here yesterday wasn't just about me," she said. "It was about every passenger who was made to feel small." She paused. "Today we correct that." Then the recording played. His voice, clear, undeniable, instructing managers to bury complaints, to reclassify discrimination, to silence it. The silence afterward was absolute. Then came the fallout. Termination, investigation, public accountability. Exactly where it all began. And Clara, she didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about fixing something that should never have been broken. Later that afternoon, she stood quietly at another gate, watching, learning, making sure things were different. When her boarding group was called, she joined the line. No priority, no privilege, just another passenger. Her ticket scanned. "Have a good flight," the agent said. Simple, respectful, normal. Exactly how it should have been from the beginning. As she walked down the jet bridge, Clara allowed herself one small thought. Power doesn't come from titles. It comes from what you do when no one thinks you have any. And sometimes, justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand still long enough for the truth to catch up.